The American Revolutionary War. We're going to take a look at the causes that led up to the war, and then we're going to look at the war itself, and then we'll look at the ramifications of the war. So let's take a look at some of the leading causes up to the war. The American Revolution. Let's first of all get some facts out. American Revolutionary War will be fought between the years of 1775 and 1783. The Revolutionary War is also known as the American Revolution. It's the war that was fought between the British and the colonists. It's a civil war in some sense, fought in American territory. The results of the American Revolution was that we're going to have a new nation. It's going to be called the United States of America. Please don't miss the American Revolution dates. What are some of those events? Okay, the very first one is the Navigation Acts of 1756. The Navigation Acts are where King George will use an old law that makes colonists pay for taxes on goods shipped in English ships. This is to pay for bringing the products back to the colonists. The colonists will get upset and they will start smuggling goods. They'll start bringing goods and making goods on their own. That's going to cause salutary neglect, which is where the British really won't pay that much attention until it's kind of too late. And then the colonists are starting to feel emboldened that they've been doing this for a number of years. So again, the Navigation Acts, a way of paying for these products by the colonists, is going to cause the United States, or the colonists to start smuggling items. That's going to cause what we call salutary neglect. And that will end up being where England will not do something against the smuggling right away. They'll kind of just turn their heads, and that's going to embolden the colonists to keep doing it. The big one is the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War is fought between France and Great Britain. It's going to be fought over here in North America. The French and English have been fighting nonstop for the better part of 100 years. And in this instance right here, this will be fought for 9 years here in America. The Indians will side with the French. The colonists will side with the British. The British will win the war. It's a great win for the British, but it's a very, very costly war. It now will cause the Great Britain to be in debt, and they've got to pay for this debt. So they're going to pass on taxes to the colonists. This will get the colonists to be upset. Next, we have the Proclamation of 1763. The Proclamation of 1763 was an agreement, I think, between the Indians that are going to live more inland in the Ohio Valley specifically, and the British government to stay out of that land. So the king passes the Proclamation Act of 1763 that says you cannot move west of the 13 colonies. You cannot move west of the Appalachian Mountains. The colonists are going to disobey this because there's some really fertile land out there and they can make more money that way. Nothing's done. The general attitude of the colonists is by 1763, the colonists had a great deal of freedom, and they really start to resent these new orders that are being issued by the king. And their reason for that is that they feel like they're being ordered to do something without having any representation, without any of their own consent. Now, this is a little bit of a misfallacy because really Parliament is not a true representation of the English people. There is just a select few people that are making decisions for the entire country. So the colonists have a great many freedoms, and they're enjoying a lot more freedom than the people of England. Their lifestyle is much better than the people of England. England is struggling financially during this time frame because of the war with France, and whereas the colonists are making good money. Next will be the Sugar Act of 1764. The Sugar Act, much like the Navigation Act, is going to be a way of raising money. And it's a pretty ingenious way. They're going to cut in half the tax on foreign molasses, hoping colonists would pay lower taxes instead of risking smuggling. They place the taxes or the duties on certain imports. And they strengthen the enforcement of the law so smugglers would be tried in a stricter court. This is going to cause the again, colonists to become upset. Next, in 1765, you had the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act is placed on all articles that are paper. So anything like newspapers or wills or licenses or deeds and pamphlets, all of those had to have a stamp given to it. It's a wax, and then you take a mold and you pound it into the wax. If you didn't have this on your paper, then it was not lawful. These are the steps. The Proclamation Act of 1763 is going to anger the colonists. The Sugar Act of 1764 is going to cause smuggling. The Stamp Act of 1765 is going to cause the Sons of Liberty to be formed. Sons of Liberty are going to start aggressively going against the British and formulating their ideas and passing it on to the colonists. The Quartering Act of 1765. This is where the British will take the troops and they will say that the colonists must provide for salaries, housing, and supplies for the British troops. The colonists didn't agree to do any of this, and they don't want to pay to it. They're frustrated that they're having to pay for this. Next, you have the Townshend Act of 1767. This again is another act, and when I say act, whether you're talking about the Townshend Act or the Quartering Act or the Stamp Act or the Sugar Act, these are all taxes. These are all ways of raising revenue for the British. So the Quartering Act was 1765, and this is going to pay for the soldiers. You're going to bring them into rich colonists, and they're going to have to pay for all of this. Then the Townshend Act of 1767 is again another tax placed on glass, on lead, on paint, on tea, and these were used to pay for the salaries of colonial officers, including the governors and judges. In response, the colonists will boycott all British goods. That's going to give even less money. So the intent of the Townshend Acts and the Sugar Act and the Quartering Act is to raise money. We'll have the reverse effect. The colonists will find ways to boycott, smuggle, and that'll bring even less money to the British. So you take a look at this little chart again. Starts with the Proclamation of 1763. That's going to anger the colonists. They're going to start becoming very, very frustrated. They can't move out into the new territory. The Sugar Act, we're going to start smuggling now. We're not going to pay for that. The Stamp Act is going to bring the Sons of Liberty and pamphlets and people speaking openly against the British. The Townshend Acts, that's going to bring about more boys for the Sons of Liberty and also the Daughters of Liberty. So more and more people are signing up. Violence will erupt. Finally, in 1768, we'll have what's called the Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre happens on March 5th, 1770, and it happens in Boston, which is one of the highest areas for tensions. It's where the troops are at, the British troops are at. It's where the colonists are the most vocal against having these redcoats. The redcoats are the British in this town. So the townspeople start to push and start to throw things and start yelling at the British Guard, and they start surrounding the British Guard, and the British Guard are going to respond. After this, again, they're going to start throwing stones and wood. Several soldiers are knocked down. Soldiers have guns. Crowd doesn't. Not a good idea to charge a group of people that have guns. They fire shots. 11 are shot. 5 are killed. The riot was used as propaganda by the colonists. The Sons of Liberty will paint this out as a group of innocent bystanders being fired upon by the British. Crispus Attucks. Remember that name, just because if I have another kid, I'm going to name him Crispus. I like that, Crispus. A lot of people name their kid Christopher. I'm going to name my kid Crispus. Crispus Attucks was the first colonist to be killed. He was an African-American descent. The British soldiers would be put on trial. They would be tried, though, by the lawyer of John Adams. And John Adams will defend them and get them off. John Adams felt that this was not a civil right of the colonists to do this. The shootings occurred as a result of self-defense, and they were found innocent by a court of colonists. So now you have the Proclamation Act, the Sugar Act of 1764, the Stamp Act of 1765, the Townshend Acts of 1767, the Boston Massacre of 1770. The Boston Massacre will bring about the Committee of Correspondence. This will be an organized group that's going to start methodically planning out propaganda, raids, smuggling, not buying of British products. It's going to be organized now, not just haphazardly put in. The Committee of Correspondence was formed in 1772 by Samuel Adams, James Warren, who will be shot and killed early in the Revolutionary War, and Mercy Otis Warren. These are pamphlets and letters that were sent out throughout the colonists, and it stirred up hatred towards the British. Mary Otis Warren was also the very first to write a history of what was happening in the Revolutionary War. Then we have the Tea Act of 1773. This is where Parliament is trying to, again, an act is a tax. The Tea Act is a tax. We're trying to raise money for Britain, the British. Everyone in Britain drinks tea, not coffee. And so most of these people were drinking tea. And it's where they pass a tax on the British East Indian Tea Company. And that we're hoping to do this so they would sell their tea cheaper than anyone else could get when they even smuggled their tea in. This ignites the Boston Tea Party. This is where you're going to dress up Sam Adams and a group of patriots will disguise themselves as Indians, because nothing says like you stand for something when you dress up like another nationality. So they're going to dress up like Indians on a raid on a British American ships, because Indians always want to raid ships because of tea. They will destroy the tea, they'll throw it over, and now the British are going to get very upset. They think it's funny. The British aren't going to find nearly as much fun in it. The Intolerable Acts of 1774. This is being in response to being the Boston Tea Party. It closed the harbor until it was all the way cleaned up. The self-government was denied in Massachusetts, and the Quartering Act was enforced. The colonists were being forced to pay for this, and they're appalled. They will set up the First Continental Congress. This will be an organized response to the King and Parliament. Look at how the people on the right side of the picture are reacting to these acts. They're tearing these picture of the king down, they're rioting, they're laughing, and they're mocking this. Okay, we're going to stop there, and we're going to move on to our second lecture.